This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.
Yeah, I think you're nailing it. I love you, but you're wrong. Is how you build a society that can be a free people, that can solve problems. And our problem, I think sometimes we get confused that our problem in the society is that we disagree. That isn't it. Like you say, disagreement is a good thing. We've got a colleague that describes, Jonathan Rausch describes knowledge as a funnel, that you want to open the funnel up as wide as you can at the top, because, ideas come from different places. I learn the most from people that I don't agree with.
The Village Square, a nervy bunch of liberals and conservatives who believe that disagreement and dialogue make for a good conversation, a good country, and a good time. At the Village Square, we talk about politics, religion, and race. The topics your mom taught you never to discuss in polite company. Listen, at the Village Square, we make pigs fly.
Hey folks, welcome to Village Squarecast. This is Corey Nathan. So glad to be with you again. Thank you for joining us for Why Does God Squad Even Work? Celebrating 15 years of friendship across difference. Village Squarecast is funded in part by Florida Humanities with support from the Federation of State Humanities Councils and the Mellon Foundation. The Village Square has been doing something pretty radical in Tallahassee and elsewhere for nearly 2 decades, getting people who don't agree on much to actually sit down and talk with each other. At the heart of that work is God Squad, an interfaith panel that's been bringing together faith leaders from across the theological and political spectrum since 2010. This particular program marks 15 years of God Squad, and the panel took a little time to look back at what made this work, what they've learned from each other, and why the relationships they built matter more now than ever. You'll hear from the God Squad regulars, Senior Pastor Josh Hall of First Baptist Church, who's been with the program since 2013, Senior Pastor Joseph Davis Jr. of Truth Gatherers Community Church, and Rabbi Paul Sidlofsky of Temple Israel. Also joining the conversation is our very own Liz Joyner, founder and president of the Village Square, who is as much an architect of this program as anyone, and Betsy Ouellette Zierden, a retired United Methodist pastor and practicing spiritual director who was one of the original God Squad voices. With that, I'll turn it over to Josh Hall, who facilitates our program and kicks off this terrific panel.
Well, thank you to all of our panelists being here today. Wanted to start with, today we're kind of looking back at 15 years. And so I'd already asked Liz if she'd be willing to open it up for us and kind of give us the background for what used to be, some of you will still know, was called Faith Food Friday. And then the panel was the God Squad. But sort of background vision for that, what were your hopes when you first started this thing way back when?
So we changed the name, by the way, realizing we had a little bit of a branding problem when we wanted to have a program on a day other than Friday. So it was sheer genius planning and execution. No, actually, the God Squad really came from a fortuitous accident and us seeing the opportunity there. When we first started the Village Square, our goal was to get a politically diverse group of people in the same room so they can see each other's humanity, good intention, and so we can really talk about problems in a way that might solve some problems, having a fuller view of everything. And the first season we did was on energy. America's energy future. And one of the things we found, which is actually true of a lot of civic spaces, so it's a problem we've been trying to solve all these years, is that more liberals showed up to the conversation that year. So the next year, we basically decided, well, we need to do something that makes it clear that conservatives are welcome in the space. And also, I think that that we wanted to build a rich public square where people could bring their faith to the conversations and not feel like they need needed to leave it at the door. So our second year, we did faith, politics, and neighbors, ground well trodden by angels and fools. I think that's a Niebuhr quote. And so we were having that conversation all year long. And this is a very Tallahassee story. One day, one morning, we were at Uptown Cafe, and we ran into Rabbi Jack Romberg and Father Dave Colleen of St. John's, who was my pastor, and they were talking about having interfaith sort of programming that they swap back and forth again. And to me, if you go to Uptown Cafe or really anywhere in Tallahassee, there's always just a million people right? So I sat down and started talking to them and said, well, what if we make this bigger? What if we make it a lot of faith leaders and congregations, and if we aim high? And so that's where it was born. And from there, we did what we always do, which is we sort of said, who do you know who disagrees with you politically, who would be really fascinating for this conversation? And from that, we invited Doug Dortch from First Baptist and Derek McGee from Bible-Based Church. And we were off to the races and off to just some amazing relationships that have endured for a very long time.
And I know one of the questions that you sometimes get asked when these panels get arranged is, well, why did you pick, it sounds like the joke set up, the rabbi, the priest, the pastor, but there was a lot of, my understanding is, because I've talked to Bill Maddox about this before, there's a lot of thought that went into that and looking at sort of the demographics.
Yeah, we actually do have a real life poster that has a pastor, a priest, an imam outside. They let me Photoshop them outside of a bar. So we've done that joke before. They were very nice people. But so I think that, again, we've always been very focused on making sure that we have political diversity in the conversation. And I think, sadly, we've been proven out correct that was something that really matters, right? Because that's where the division is right now. We wanted all the other kinds of diversity, but that was really important. And so, for one, I think it's easy. There are a lot of efforts that go for all kinds of diversity, and then very often what you lose is the political diversity, I think. So, and we try to have all kinds of diversity. We have guests here. We have lots of friends, God Squad friends that pull that diversity in. But we wanted to make sure that the majority, representing the majority around political diversity stayed centered in this effort. And it's actually been pretty hard to do because we like all kinds of diversity, but that sort of core has been really important. And then also the other part of it is it's always been relational. We started doing that way back at the beginning, again, we asked Dave and Jack, who do you know? Who would be a part of this? And we build everything relationally, right? And so, when Derek decided that he was going to go, we asked Derek. That's how we know Joe. And amazing, magical things happen when you pull the threads of those relationships.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I got invited year 2 was because Dave Colleen and I were in Leadership Tallahassee together, and they were looking for inclusion, I guess.
Yes.
To add a female
Yes, our first
pastor.
panel was all male.
Yeah, they wanted a female. And so because of the relationship I already had with Dave, he suggested me. So that was to your point.
And that kind of leads to my next question, which is just to get a sense of sort of the longevity for this, is when did each of you first start with God Squad? So for you?
The second year. So I was on for 13 full years before I retired.
Well, since it's been 15 years, yes, I came in the 12th year. So.
Yeah, that might be right. OG. I mean, never been on the God Squad. So
yeah, we fixed that today.
This is my third year here in this position, and I started right away. So I was looking, it was just over 2 years that I had my first session with this panel.
And Josh, you?
I had to look back. So it was October 2013. I think as some will know this with us, as we had an interim then. And so I stepped in the interim and I think it's worked out. I think I've been able to show up at least once every year, except for maybe one, where either because of interims or filling in for a pastor or whatever. So,
well, you're actually an example of a basic Village Square principle, which is nobody ever actually leaves.
So true. So just open it up then for the panel. I think one of the things that in the crowd might have their thoughts, but maybe a favorite or most meaningful memory, just something about that sticks out to you from your time in God Squad. Some of you have longer, some of you have less, but just a memory or two that just sticks out to you, and especially one that might sort of encapsulate what's special about what we do up here.
I'd love to share that because I've been thinking about what I'd say. And some of you were there. We were meeting at Temple Israel, and there was so much racial violence taking place. And there were we were discussing it. And I don't even remember the exact context, but Derek began to share with us vulnerably and deep from his heart the reality of being a Black man and having a Black son in this culture. With tears running down his face, he shared with us how that week he had to have a conversation that he knew was coming because of where we live, but he had hoped it would not come. And it was his child had been called the N-word in school. Some of you were there, remember that? And it was just so enlightening. I don't even know how to put words around it. I was so grateful for his vulnerability and his willingness to share. And I tell you what, it shut a lot of us up that thought we could contribute positively to the conversation. And I don't mean that we didn't have anything to share. I just meant that after that, we understood at a level that no news story could ever help us to understand, and which is what really Liz is after, conversations that help us to see our humanity.
I was thinking about the times of conversation of growing in empathy and also perspectives in theology. When we get into conversation, I remember Rabbi sharing about crossing over the Red Sea. And he gave a perspective of how they practice empathy towards the enemies that drowned in the Red Sea. That perspective that he shared that day was very enlightening for me because many times, and sometimes the way we practice faith, we rejoice over our enemies drowning. And he gave a different perspective on that. And I think it grew in empathy. So sometimes just being a part of what we do here at God Squad give me the opportunity to gain perspective, insight, and approaches to faith and religion. And so I've really been impacted by that as well.
So I have so many, and I guess I wanted to take a moment to just say, Nancy Bueller's here today, and I said something about how you never leave Village Square or God Squad, and I think about Fran and what an important part of this endeavor he was, and he will never leave our hearts. And I think that has been true for so many of the people who aren't sitting up here. We just have had a true, deep relationship to be able to have the conversations. I mean, you talk about that one time with Derek. It is that relational grounding that creates this opportunity to be able to say things that are very real, that sometimes we aren't. And human beings have this just amazing capacity. So in some ways, I can't list all the times that's happened. I would say one sort of favorite general thing about God Squad is we did make the decision decision early on that because, the Village Square is not a faith-based organization. We have lots of non-faith-based programs that we were going to have, that the panel was going to be all faith-based. And we had some wonderful, cool humanists who were really interested in being regulars on the panel. So we sort of figured that out at the beginning, and we talked with them about why we were keeping God Squad diverse faith leaders. And this wonderful group of humanists had came for, you may or may not have known, for many, many, many years. They had a God Squad table. They became friends with the members of the God Squad. I would see them up here afterwards, talking about ideas and everything. And I'm gonna get emotional during this. And I think that over time, maybe that's one of my favorite things that happened here. And our experience is that that's always what happens. If you get people in real direct contact with each other, if you give them kind of an institution to preserve, a thing you're doing together that matters, it brings out wonderful things in us. And so that has been one of the leaders moved to California about 1.5 years ago, so I haven't seen them here quite as often. But they're invited back if any of humanists are in the room. And then also I wanted to tell a quick little story that to me, it just captures what an amazing group of, okay, I'm going to get more emotional. It has been such a joy to work with all of you and the people who came before. Such extraordinary human beings, such wise human beings, and such talented human beings who literally have no time. When we try to schedule an annual meeting where we talk about what the topics are, it is the most ridiculous thing to schedule. And then you realize.
I know. Well, because at some point we stopped meeting. I used to love those meetings, even though they were like, can you meet at 6:45 a.m.?
Oh, yeah. It was yeah, Derek in particular, we had to do like 6:45 for him. It was just like, I'm not even awake then. But it makes you realize the gift that they're giving us every time they come here. They do not have time to do this, and they keep gifting this to all of us. And their God Squad is the favorite thing we do. I wish that we could wave a magic wand and there'd be a God Squad in every single community, because I think it really deeply matters. And these are amazing people. And my one little quick story is that we did, we've done some at WFSU, and, we identify a facilitator, and then we put our heads together ahead of time. And maybe 1.5 years ago, we did one at WFSU, and Latricia Scriven came in, who, sadly has moved. And she did not know we were going to be televised, live streamed, and she didn't realize she was the facilitator. And all she did is go, "Oh, okay." And she went up there, and maybe I'll send out, Christine, maybe we can send out to this list the video of that. You wouldn't even believe that she did not have any idea she was a facilitator until like 10 minutes before the program. So, but I think that's kind of par for the course for the incredible people that we have the honor of hanging out with.
A few things that come to mind. One is more of a general comment that I love always doing interfaith work, and especially with this panel, because we learn from each other. We hear each other and we share so much in common. And even though it's from different perspectives and may have different viewpoints, we can hear what the other says, and I know it enhances my identity as a rabbi, as a Jew, as a human being, to hear and learn from others. So that is very valuable to me in general. And I also love the fact that we share so well, that the panel is always very balanced. Everyone is respectful of one another, takes turns, make sure everyone has equal opportunity to speak. And if one person answered the question first, they make sure someone else answers the next question first, and so on. So that's been a really positive thing. But the other thing that is equally, if not even more important, is that we can agree to disagree respectfully, because honestly, I've always said real interfaith work is not just finding the similarities. That's very important, but also learning differences and not just saying, well, I'll tolerate it, or I'll just I'll ignore it, but I can respect it. I can celebrate it. I can learn from it. So one particular conversation I remember having had to do a lot with the idea of truth, and this keeps coming up. What is truth? And one of my lines that I always come back to is I believe no one has a monopoly on the truth, that everyone has a truth that they can teach. Now, it doesn't mean everything is true, but certainly there are many perspectives of what is true. And so when we discuss things like the Ten Commandments as absolute truth, I said, I see them as extremely important, but not as absolute truth, because they can be interpreted in many different ways. So the idea of not killing, for example, not murdering, is something we'd all, I'm sure, agree with. But on the other hand, if you say, well, what about self-defense? What about abortion? What about euthanasia? What about all these different things? There would be a whole bunch of different views, all of which I think value life and have that in common, but have a different view of what it means to value life. So that's also very important. And the third thing that I would mention is that I think that despite the seriousness of this and the ability to agree on serious topics and even disagree on serious topics, it's also done with a lightness and a sense of humor. And I've always appreciated that. There's always people being very human in their presentations. That was mentioned before. The people that come to see us also bring their humanity to it with the questions they ask. And that without everyone coming, it would not be the same thing. It would be us sitting in an empty room talking to each other, which is nice, but it's important to have everyone together. So this, the shared humanity, including the light side of things in a world that often makes us want to yell or scream or cry. It's nice to laugh as well.
And I think the one memory that comes to mind for me is actually an example of that. So it was a few years ago. So we'll have, if you haven't picked up, we'll have like a planning meeting, get together, and we'll brainstorm topics either that we think would be relevant or seem to be front of mind for our community or the culture at large or whatever. And then sometimes there's certain things that we could always talk about, but we try to let them have air between seasons before going back to this. And so it's 2 years ago, and we said, well, what about capital punishment? The death penalty. And so I think it was Betsy and Tim and Derek and Jack. And so we were kind of like, well, are we going to have any diversity on there? And I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's me then. So we're like, all right, well, so we're going to have that. Yeah. So this is where I'm going with that. So we got to have that panel. I think great panel, great discussion. I mean, everybody was robust. It's like one of the times that like Derek and Tim leave me hanging out to dry, but that's okay. But here's the memory is I remember afterwards, Betsy turning to me and saying, I love you, but you're wrong. And y'all, I mean, to me, that sums up why this works. You know what I'm saying? Like, she didn't check her convictions at the door. I didn't water mine down, but she didn't think, she might have been disappointed, but she didn't think any less of me in a sense. Does that make sense? Like, it was still like, okay. But it's not like, well, now I've written you off. Now I don't want anything to do with you anymore. And I think that's one of the things that we've been able to see over the years is, I remember Derek and Jack, I'll use their relationship. It was a very, their words, very father-son kind of affection, but there was a lot they disagreed on, and they would articulate it, but it never got personal. And it was always, about the issue and articulating that and, explaining what you believe and why you believe it and doing it with conviction, but never letting that get in the way of me actually seeing their humanity and caring about that person. So that's always been a fond memory for me.
Yeah, I think you're nailing it. I love you, but you're wrong. Is how you build a society that can be a free people, that can solve problems. And our problem, I think sometimes we get confused that our problem in the society is that we disagree. That isn't it. Like you say, disagreement is a good thing. We've got a colleague that describes, Jonathan Rausch describes knowledge as a funnel, that you want to open the funnel up as wide as you can at the top because, ideas come from different places. I learn the most from people that I don't agree with all the time. So our problem isn't that we disagree. It's that we demonize and vilify people that we disagree with. We don't love them.
Yeah, I would just, again, talking about disagreeing respectfully. I say this with great respect and caring and admiration. I'd amend that statement if it were coming from me to say, I love you, but I disagree. I don't believe in you. What's that?
Wait, what? Missed that.
I don't think I said you're wrong. I think I said, I love you, Josh, but I totally disagree with you.
There you go.
Okay, there it is. I disagree with you.
So we agree. We agree. Yes, I couldn't imagine you were saying that, but yeah, I'm glad that would have the opportunity to clarify that. And we may think, to me, you're wrong, but it means I disagree with you. Now, does that mean that there is everything goes, anything goes? No, I don't think so. I mean, I often very much have people come to me and say something, and I say, I'm sorry, we can't accept that. But there are times when someone comes, for example, interested in conversion to Judaism, and I will have a long discussion with them. And if they are holding on to something that is contrary to basic core Jewish values, I will not get angry at them. I will not say you're wrong. I will just say you're entitled to believe that, but you have to make a choice. And if you believe that, then that's not a Jewish view. You have to decide if you want to do that or not. So that is, I think we can all maintain our own integrity, our own boundaries, our own the essence of who we are, but disagree and respectfully hear the others and say you have every right and I respect your belief, and I learn from that belief.
So along those, and we're starting to touch on, I think, some of this. What do you think what's the secret for this? Like, what makes this work? What makes Liz want to replicate this across the country and the world? We've touched on some of these things, but let's articulate it. Like, why does this work when maybe other things don't?
Well, I think we can't ignore, you got to have the right people in the room, right? So I think there's some intentionality upon God's Squad staff on, those who sit on the panel. I'm not trying to stroke egos here, but there's a reason we're here. And I think that's a part of it. And then I think the thoughtfulness, I've been so blessed and inspired by the thoughtfulness of subject matter. And even jumping into hot topics, not straying away from hot topics. And I think it's the daring aspect with the approach of respect that garners attention. But we're going to talk about it, and not just talk about it. We're going to talk about it from different points of view. And so it's not narrow-minded, it's not tunnel vision. And I think that's some of the things that garner the respect that I feel when I come in here for God Squad.
There's two words next to each other that have been kind of resonating for me lately is existential humility. Like we are people on this panel that really do think about, the deep, important questions. At the same time, we think with a sense of humility and a desire to learn. I mean, I believe that is true of me when I'm sitting alone preparing a sermon. Even, I'm seeking knowledge and seeking ways to present what I believe is my perspective on the scripture in a way that allows me to glean from those that are different or think differently, and then also to present to my congregation in such a way that they still are invited to think about what I said. In other words, just because I think I'm right doesn't mean you have to believe like I do, So existential humility is kind of characteristic of us all. I like those words together too.
Making sure that we touch base with each other. I would say the times when there have been times that things have been, just like all relationships, there are complexities. And when we've sort of been too busy to touch base with each other, we realize we sort of have to get back to that. We've got the way that we build almost everything at the Village Square now that we've learned through the years from things like God Squad is we call it a core catalyst model. It's like rings of a tree. As we make sure that the center core reflects the diversity that we want to reflect in the room and the community. And then we build it like rings of a tree. And if things get difficult, we pull the rings back, and so check back in with each other and be with each other and make sure that we're okay. And I agree with everything that everyone has said about it. I also think that that they're really, we're looking for people who have that kind of humility, the right people who can be the core of this, who can have that kind of respect for each other. And I recall Father Tim came originally as a guest on some topic. I don't remember what it was. And I remember that first program. I don't know if any of you all were here.
I called him and invited him.
Did you?
And the backstory says, he said, I don't want to be the only Catholic on that panel if you're just going to attack Catholicism.
Yeah.
He said that to me on the phone.
And I would say, see, I never knew.
And he's not here to refute that actually happened.
But then that first panel, he said what he said with humility and respect, and someone gave him a hard time. Do you remember that? I mean, a relatively hard time from the audience, and he kind of held his ground, but also was incredibly generous and kind, and was probably pretty funny because he can do that. And really, by the time he walked out, we knew that we needed to invite him to be a regular member. Yeah.
Yeah. Can't imagine.
Love knowing that whole story.
So I'll hop in. I'll say the things that and actually it's funny you say that because Tim's example I think demonstrates a lot of these. One, I think for as far as panelists go, you need conviction. Like you actually you've got to have some core conviction that you're not simply gonna, well, sure, that sounds great to anything that comes up here. Otherwise, we're just that echo chamber that we talk about. So you got to have some sort of conviction, and you've got to have some confidence as well. And where I think the confidence comes across is it helps you to remain calm up here. You're not, well, I'm losing, or they're not getting what I'm saying, or the people. But if I have convictions, but I have some confidence in that, then I'm not worried if at the end of the day I've persuaded anybody up here, persuaded everybody else. I'm going to try to give a fair articulation, but I can remain confident in that. I'd say just keep alliterating, do the Baptist pastor thing. But kindness, or at least phonetically, we're going to alliterate. But people that the panelists, and Liz, I think would agree, that you can tell me if you disagree, the panelists that have worked the best and the ones that maybe have, presented complexities, the ones that work best are the ones that just by nature, they're just more kind. They get along. They're just more agreeable. They can still be every bit as firm in their convictions and everything else. But I haven't seen anyone do well who's belligerent by nature. That's not what we're going for here.
Yeah, and we definitely try to steal away from that, and also from people who outside of the God Squad context, from people who make their living inside of the din of the us and them. And I think one of our colleagues, Jonathan Haidt, describes the kind of the moment we're in, the polarization, as being electromagnetic currents that suck us into one box or the other. And I think that's just a very human thing, to get sucked into the boxes, and to sort of default to that us versus them. And so I think we try to recognize people who. And I do think the humility has a lot to do with it.
And the other thing, David and I were talking about this, getting ready for this, and 15 years. So there's a part that's just about sticking it out and staying in it and staying together and living in Tallahassee and caring about the community and caring about the churches and caring about each other, but not just those that are sitting here or those that are sitting out here, but we care about this community. And we also know, and we've learned through Village Square, through many of your programs, that local is where it's at. Like the way we overcome global problems or national problems is by being present to where we are at. I guess bloom where you're planted, somebody said.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. And for all these years, we've seen the national discourse get coarser and coarser and more difficult. We share opinions that are very diverse inside this relational local network, and so we started at a certain point saying to people out of town, kind of, I think that we're onto something. There's something about being in your community and having real relationships across it. And now the whole field is now listening to us. I'm going next week to Boston to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, where they're having a group of local practitioners, and we're talking to the people in this organization, which was founded by John Adams during the Revolutionary War. The first two invitations, or the first two acceptances to Academy invitations that they have on the wall there, are from George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. So this is an auspicious group of people. And they've invited us to be on this small sort of, advisory group. And now we're inviting a larger group. I was at University of Virginia, where they're doing the same thing through Karsh Institute of Democracy. The whole world is coming to see that this really matters. And so when you go about your lives and you're doing small community things, recognize that what you're doing when you're reaching out and you're having relationships is how we fix the broader problem. It's the ballast that we've lost, and it's so important.
Yeah. So there was a Jewish philosopher who actually became even more popular outside the Jewish world, Martin Buber, in the 20th century. And one of his famous lines was, "All real living is meeting." And I think that is also a big part of what we do. That relationships, life is based on relationships. Life is based on meeting one another, as you said, Liz, not running away from each other, not polarizing. And I think, to answer the broad question of this panel today, which is, why are we here? Why does this work? And it's been mentioned in different ways. We are trying to fill a big gap in society. Right? We're trying to come together. We're trying to do the opposite of polarization that is happening. I've heard the word politics used a few times early on in this session, and I don't believe this is a group that deals with politics, but it is, it is a group that deals with morals and values and ethics that unfortunately has entered the political world, and we have to try and make sure. I struggle with this as a rabbi. On the pulpit, with people saying to me, "You should talk more about this and that and the other," and I don't, as a rule, talk about political things, but I do say, I'll talk about values that impact on those things. And so, if we're going to talk about the big topics, I don't do it. So I hate to say it this way, but top down from the pulpit and just talk, and everyone has to just listen. I like to have discussions after and have classes or have a panel or have other people and have different views. And do we get criticism for it? Sure. We get criticism for people saying we didn't like that person's view. We didn't like that person's view because this one was too right-wing and that one was too left-wing. So we're doing it right because we're getting all the views. But I will always stand up for saying all the views should be heard. All the reasonable, serious, respectful views should be heard. And that's exactly what we're doing here. And we're truly living by meeting with each other and listening, agreeing, disagreeing, and getting to know each other as people.
So one last question then, and then we'll see if there's any questions out there. How, based on these principles and things that have made this work, how do you think people can sort of apply that? We'll do the whole sermon thing, application at the end of the message, but like what if this transfers into everyday life and everyday conversations? It's a softball because all of it does, but I'm going to let y'all sort of weigh in. What are the pieces of this, and how can folks connect that in their everyday lives?
Oh, absolutely. For one, I get to practice this trend in my daily life. Besides pastoring, I still work. I'm close to retirement, which is good news. But I get to practice it in state government and I actually choose. I want to talk about this aspect. I get to choose to build a diverse team. All right. And that's my choice. So I intentionally, when I do a lot of hiring or building a team or working on a project, I intentionally choose a diverse team. Different backgrounds, different skill sets, people who are going to agree with each other. I pick it. I don't want a room full of nodders and yes men. I want somebody to say, no, I disagree, and do it with respect and passion. So for me, we get to practice diversity here, and then we get to become skillful at it and begin to take into other places that we go. I want to add this story to it. It may have something to do with your question, but if it doesn't, you guys stay on track, please. But it still has something to do with God Squad. Because one of the things that happens here through conversation, we build community, but from community, we know community also has family. And there's a sense of family that happens here. There's a God Squad faithful who's not here today, but normally always here. And I can't grab her name, but she normally sits either here, front seats. And she's not here today. But I knew we were making great progress when I got a hand spanking from my elder. And it was the most joyous thing to me. Wonderful God Squad session at Father's Tim, one of his classroom areas there. And then after it, she said, Pastor Joe, come over here. And a friend were in the car. And she said, hey, stick out your hand. And I just followed, and, not knowing what was next. And I got the most fondest spanking on my hand that I thought was so dear. And she said, you were great today, but that chewing of the gum has to go. It said that chewing of the gum has to go. There was a few words we could not understand because you chewed that gum ferociously. And I thought it was the fondest thing about God Squad. I didn't know she was going to spank me. She didn't ask permission to spank me.
It takes a village to raise a pastor.
It happened that day, but it spoke volumes on the respectful license that happens in relationship. It was a respectful license. I wasn't offended. I held out my hand out of respect. Her friend in the passenger side smiled. I didn't know what was happening. And after she told me what I did wrong, she spanked my hand. And I just think it speaks to some of the relationships that go deeper because of our conversation. So I'm kind of off track, but hopefully I got back on.
Now we notice you're not chewing gum. So that's good.
And I've read the gum ever since. I'm cured.
Other thoughts on how folks can apply this, and then we'll open it up.
So I think if you can take sort of the real crux of what we've learned through this process, what I've learned through this process is that I learn the most. I am a better person because I open my heart to people who don't see things my way, and it always amazing things happen when you do that, and I think that we live in a world where sort of bad actors make money making us not want to be with each other. So I think if you take that basic lesson and then just manifest it out into the world, and all of us know someone who maybe we haven't seen them lately, and we kind of go, oh yeah, we don't really see things the same way. Reach out to them. My experience is that it always surprises on the upside, and it's the kind of societal healing that we need to do at a broad level.
Yeah, I just want to tell a little story from many years ago when I was a student at rabbinical school in London. And we used to go every year, and I went 2 times back in the 1980s to a conference in Germany of all places, for Jewish and Muslim and Christian theological students and people in the caring professions. And it was, as for someone Jewish back then, which was merely a few decades after the Holocaust, it was my first time in Germany. It was kind of eye-opening to see and to experience. I know a lot of people would say I would never set foot there, but more than where it was the idea of everyone getting together and spending an entire week in one place, eating together, studying together, and all sorts of things. And one of the things, though, was that the people were from all over various countries, and they spoke different languages. And so every time we would have a discussion, someone would need to translate what was said, and then the person would have to wait to respond, and then they would say something and it would have to be translated. And what I realized, in addition to just the obvious, the need for it, is that it really helped. It really helped to take a breath and pause and be forced basically not to knee-jerk reaction respond to something. And so even though we don't sit and translate, after, and we don't pause in between statements, I think we basically have the same idea here, that we're all thinking about it, and we've kind of learned how to respond in a way that hopefully is as you said, assertive but respectful and understanding. And I think that's part of what we need in society today, is the ability not to just react or to sweep under the carpet, but to just take a breath, literally or figuratively, and then respond and state your point of view, but do it respectfully and start a dialogue. So I think that's one of the things that is very important from here, that we can take into the world in everything, whether it's a family dynamic and conflict, or with friends, or political, or religious, or anything else.
You might have just achieved world peace with that idea. Like, can you imagine if everything, you just had a translator, right?
I wish it doesn't have to literally work that way, but if everyone just stopped and thought, it was so blatant to me, even though no one said, and by the way, this is what we're doing, it just made it so much more of a amicable conversation. So it's not the translating as much as the pausing and not overreacting.
For those of you who are leading faith communities still, how aware are your communities that you participate in God Squad, A, and B, how have they reacted, if at all?
My faith community and church love it. One of the things they're asking me is, when is it coming over to our church? Because they rotate it. Does it tour? And I've told them maybe in due season. Again, I'm normally bouncing from here to there because I work a full-time job, but they are elated about the potential to host it at our site. We see it as a win on strategy, on building community, and so it's been nothing but great respect for it.
I'd say they're aware. We promote it in our newsletter, and just in candor, I'd say that their reaction is probably similar to what Liz has to deal with the community at large. So we got some folks here that are part of our church that they're going to be here every time we have God Squad, and we have others that have never come. And I would say those that, on the spectrum are farther to the right are least likely to be here, though we'll still have some. And those that are more towards the center or towards the left are more likely to find this, engaging and to be the active participants. But I've never recalled that we've gotten pushback or anything like that for participating, because of what we're trying to do up here.
And this seems like an opportune time to say thank you to First Baptist Church, who was our original host. And yes. And has been with us all those years, as has Temple Israel. And I think that speaks really strongly to both of your faith communities for that kind of durable relationship, and also the ability to, be out in the world in that kind of open, amazing way.
Well, I'm thrilled to say that I see some people from my former congregation here, several people. So I guess they're supportive still.
And I'll just add, of course, that our congregation is certainly supportive of interfaith work in dialogue. We do host every year, and my friend and colleague Rabbi Jack Bromberg was mentioned as one of the founders. And one of the things I immediately let him know when I got my feet wet in the community after the first few months is that I was getting very involved with God Squad, and he was very, very happy to hear that, because he still remembers fondly his, helping found it and participating.
And we
in it.
did pulpit exchanges too amongst us at times. I don't know if you'll ever take that on again, but
It
Yes,
went well.
I talked about that with some clergy, and I just will add, to just take point of privilege of saying, as the Jewish representative in this group, which is meant to be, interfaith, that it is especially meaningful to be able to have this dialogue, not only among denominations of Christianity, but among different religions, with different points of view, and again, seeing what we share in common too. So that really is very important, and I think that's valuable to my congregation as well.
I don't have a question, but I just want to say that today has been very helpful, because I often mention to other friends that I'm going to the God Squad. Well, what's the God Squad? And then trying to explain what goes on. You can say who's here, but trying to explain that. So this has been very helpful today. Thank you.
We are somewhat inexplicable.
Yes. Individually and as a
Liz, you mentioned earlier that you were looking at expanding this. Our country is so in chaos and conflict and tearing families apart, and not tearing them apart, but just we're not looking forward to Thanksgiving because of all the conversations. Everybody in my family has different opinions and so on. And I think this is a remarkable challenge and much needed. Thank you.
Thank you. I do think that my emotional experience of all this is that we're in a tragic situation that's completely unnecessary, and that actually you can solve for it much more easily than sometimes you think you can. It's when you gather people together, you see their good intention. You may disagree till the cows come home, but that becomes the 20th most important thing about who you are to each other. And in a world that's digital, that we interact with people two-dimensionally, it's always going to roll in the other direction. And so the way that you counteract that is you reach into your community and into your relationships, and as I sort of move towards retirement, I take those relationships with people who see things completely differently than I do as some of the most important and meaningful relationships of my life.
All right. We're respecting your time. One last question from anybody? All right. Then y'all express your appreciation to the panel, and especially just shout out to Liz.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
And thanks for having me back. I had fun.
It's really y'all. They're the secret.
Corey Nathan back with you. There's a line from this conversation that I keep coming back to. Josh Hall is recounting a moment after a God Squad session on capital punishment. He and Betsy had been on opposite sides of the issue, and as they wrapped up, she turned to him and said, "I love you, but you're wrong." That's actually a phrase I've heard many times in my life. If you knew my family, you'd know what I'm talking about. Anyway, that's it. That's the whole thing. I love you, but you're wrong. 5 words that somehow contain everything we've lost in public life and everything we need to get back. The conviction stayed. The relationship stayed. Neither one got checked at the door. Liz put it plainly, our problem isn't that we disagree, it's that we demonize people we disagree with. We don't love them. And what God Squad has modeled for 15 years is that you actually can do both. Hold your convictions and hold on to each other. Rabbi Sidlovsky offered something I found equally remarkable, the idea of all real living is meeting, from the philosopher Martin Buber. Relationships, not positions. Presence, not performance. That's what makes this room different from most rooms right now. If you've got someone in your life you haven't talked to in a while because the politics got in the way, this episode is a good reason to reach back out. Please consider joining our members and supporting this programming. You can become a member for just $7 a month or $76 a year. And your business can join for $250. Head to villagesquare.us/donate to join today. That's villagesquare.us/donate. While you're there, sign up for Village Square's newsletter to stay up to date with everything happening. Go to villagesquare.us, and there's a pop-up for you to sign up just as you go to the site. But once you're there, you can scroll to the bottom, and there's a sign-up box at the bottom as well. Village Squarecast is funded in part by Florida Humanities with support from the Federation of State Humanities Councils and the Mellon Foundation. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of our funders. Learn more at floridahumanities.org. We appreciate you listening to Why Does God Squad Even Work? Celebrating 15 years of friendship across difference. Until next time, we challenge you to reach out with an open heart and mind to someone who doesn't look or think like you. It changes everything. We'll talk to you soon, and thanks so much for listening to Village Squarecast.